Hello, this is Mary Collardetta, and we're looking at how to know God's will. How to know God's will by how He expressed His will in the Bible to various people, and to the people of Israel, and to the apostles, and through Jesus, and to the saints, to everybody, and to the nations. What is God's will? Does it change? His overall will does not change. He reveals it in His commandments and in what He says. Anyways, today we're going to look at Judges chapter 15. We're going to continue with the story of Samson. We know Samson was consecrated to the Lord in the womb to be a Nazirite. And we know that it was, in a sense, a miraculous birth because the mother was barren. And then later he wanted to marry a Philistine woman. And through all of these things, all of these events, the Spirit of the Lord comes upon him. And so he wanted to marry that woman of Timnah, a Philistine. And the whole story is that he tells her 30 men, groomsmen, I guess, or the bride's men, a riddle, and if they can answer it, he will give them 30 sets of garments and 30 tunics. And if they answer it within the 7 days of the wedding feast, and if they don't answer it, then they have to give him those 30 sets of garments and 30 tunics. Well, his wife cries to him and cries because she has been threatened by these men that if she doesn't tell them the answer, they will burn her family down. So he gives in and tells her. And then she ends up marrying the best man. Oh, and in order to pay off his debt, the Spirit of the Lord comes upon Samson, and he goes and kills 30 men of Ashkelon and gives their goods to these 30 men. So that's a brief summary, and now I'm going to read chapter 15. After some time, in the season of the wheat harvest, Samson visited his wife. "Let me go into my wife's room." Her father would not let him go in. He said, "I thought you hated her, so I gave her to your best man. Her younger sister is better. You may have her instead." Samson said to him, "This time I am guiltless if I harm the Philistines." So Samson went and caught 300 jackals, and turning them tail to tail, he took some torches and tied one between each pair of tails. He then kindled the torches and set the jackals loose in the standing grain of the Philistines, thus burning both the shocks and standing grain, the vineyards and olive groves. When the Philistines asked, "Who has done this?" they were told, "Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because his wife was taken and given to his best man." So the Philistines went up and destroyed her and her family by fire. Samson said to them, "If this is how you act, I will not stop until I have taken revenge on you." And he struck them hip and thigh, a great slaughter. Then he went down and stayed in a cleft of the crag at Etam. The Philistines went up and encamped in Judah. They deployed themselves against Lehi. When the men of Judah asked, "Why have you come against us?" they answered, "To take Samson prisoner, to do to him as he has done to us." 3,000 men of Judah went down to the cleft of the crag at Etam and said to Samson, "Do you not know that the Philistines are our rulers? Why then have you done this to us?" He answered them, "As they have done to me, so I have done to them." They said to him, "We have come down to bind you and deliver you to the Philistines." Samson said to them, "Swear to me that you will not attack me yourselves." "No," they replied, "we will only bind you and hand you over to them. We will certainly not kill you." So they bound him with 2 new ropes and brought him up from the crag. When he reached Lehi and the Philistines came shouting to meet him, the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him. The ropes around his arms became like flax that is consumed by fire, and his bonds melted away from his hands. Coming upon the fresh jawbone of an ass, he reached out, grabbed it, and with it killed 1,000 men. Then Samson said, "With the jawbone of an ass I have piled them in a heap. With the jawbone of an ass I have slain 1,000 men." As he finished speaking, he threw the jawbone from him, and so that place was named Ramoth Lehi. Being very thirsty, he cried to the Lord and said, "You have put this great victory into the hand of your servant. Must I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised?" Then God split the cavity in Lehi, and water issued from it. And Samson drank till his spirit returned, and he revived. Hence it is called En Hakkore in Lehi to this day. And Samson judged Israel for 20 years in the days of the Philistines. So I would encourage you, as I do, to summarize a story so that you remember the key points. So this is my summary. So Judges 14 ends with Samson's wife marrying the best man. But Judges chapter 15 elaborates on how that came about. So Samson goes to his wife's father, and he brings a goat, and he goes to ask him to allow him to go into his wife's room. But the dad said he thought Samson hated her, and he gave her to be married to his best man. And then the dad told him that the younger sister is better, and he could have her. And Samson said, "This time, quote, I am guiltless if I harm the Philistines," unquote. He tied 300 jackals together, tail by tail, with torches, and let them loose in the grain fields, in the vineyards and olive groves. But the Philistines then paid him back by destroying his wife and her family by fire. Then Samson struck them at hip and thigh, and had a great slaughter of the Philistines. And then the Philistines went to Lehi of Judah, and the men of Judah asked them why they have come against them. But the Philistines only wanted Samson. They wanted to do to him what he had done to them. And then 3,000 men of Judah went to Samson and said, "Do you not know that the Philistines are our rulers? Why then have you done this to us?" And he said to them, "As they did to me, I did to them." Then the men of Judah who came to deliver him to the Philistines, they said that's why they've come. So he agreed that he would go with them if they swore not to attack him. And they agreed. They bound him with 2 new ropes, and they took him to the Philistines. But when they came to the Philistines, the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and the ropes and the bonds melted away. Samson picked up a fresh jawbone of an ass, and he killed 1,000 men. After this, he was very thirsty. And then he said to the Lord, "You gave me victory, but now I am going to die of thirst?" He says, "Must I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised?" So God opened up a crag or rock, and water came out, and he was fine. And he ruled Israel 20 years in the days of the Philistines. So, what's God's will here? Well, we know before Samson was even born, it was the will of God. After the 40 years, he's going to redeem the people out of the hands of the Philistines. And he chose Samson before, even in the womb, before he was born. He chose him to be born of this day-night woman and her husband. And it says that the Spirit of the Lord comes upon him. It empowers him. Now, he's a big guy. He's not he's not meek and mild. He's big and tough and rough. And so he's got this strength. And remember, he killed a lion. He killed 30 men of Ashkelon. He bound together 300 jackals, put torches in them, lit the torches, and then and then it says, so this is interesting. So his wife, remember, he pleased him and he wanted her as his wife. And well, then he left, and then when he came back to be with her, the dad had given her to the best man. So this also was of the Lord. So all of these, what I want us to think about is that circumstances that we don't understand, which are most circumstances, we think our hand has done things, and our hand really doesn't do things. If we're calling, it does to a certain degree, but when we want the will of God and we seek Him in His will, then the circumstances that God brings about will be His will for us, His purpose for what we do. And we see that with Samson. So because his wife had been given to the best man, he felt that he was just, he was guiltless in destroying the crops and the vineyard and the groves, olives of the Philistines. They had taken away his property, in a sense, his wife, even though it was the dad. So, but Samson already knew that the Philistines were looking for a way to, let's put it this way, they had threatened the wife that they would burn her family down if she didn't find out the answer to the riddle. And now they did it. They did what they said they were going to do. And so now he's avenging himself for the loss of his wife. So now they want to avenge themselves, not on the people of Judah, not on Israel, but on Samson himself, because they know it's Samson that's done this. They are rulers over Israel. They could have inflicted judgment on the whole people, but they did not. So they ask the Philistines or they asked the men of Judah of Lehi for Samson. So 3,000 men. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of men. They go up to him and ask him to go with them, to give himself up. Let them give him up to the Philistines so that they're not destroyed in retribution for what Samson did. Now, I think it's a very interesting thing what Samson says to them. For him to go up with them, he wasn't afraid of the Philistines. He wasn't afraid of the men of Judah. But he says to them, don't attack me. Now, why do you think he says this? So pause me, think about why he would ask them to promise not to attack them. So if you've thought about it and prayed about it, perhaps it was because if they attack him, he would be obligated to defend himself and attack them, and he didn't want to do that. Remember, in his heart, he knows that, I'm sure he probably has this idea to be a deliverer of the Philistines, of the people of Israel from the Philistines. But he's not sure how this is going to happen. All of these events have happened, and he has walked in them, trusting God. Remember, Hebrews 11 said, by faith, Samson did blah, 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 that did his tremendous acts. By faith in God, he was trusting in God. And so, all of these events happen. Now, when we liken that to ourselves, we can think, when we trust in God to direct our steps, trust that the steps you take are from Him. So, he was guiltless in the revenge that he sought, that was conducted against the Philistines. In this last situation, when he's delivered up to the Philistines, his ropes, new ropes, not old and frayed, new ropes, melt away. And he picks up a fresh jawbone of an ass, and he slays 1,000 men of the Philistines. So he is bringing judgment down, little by little, from 30 men of Ashkelon to the men when he, after they had burned the house and the family down, he struck them hip and thigh, a great slaughter, and then 1,000 men. And it says he doesn't say he rules, it says he judged Israel for 20 years in the days of the Philistine. So I did not look this up, so I'm guilty of not looking it up. Is it 20 years within the reign of the Philistines? I think so. So he is judging the Philistines. I'm sorry, he's not judging the Philistines. He judges them. He judges them by how they are with Israel, even though it was God's will to put the people of Israel under the dominion of the Philistines for 40 years. But it says he judged Israel for 20 years. That means that he instructed them in the ways of God. He judged them by what was right and wrong, by by leaning to and looking to the Lord. And that's all we need to do. We need to be faithful, to walk in obedience to what we feel God's leading us in the steps that we take each day. And most of the days, all we have to do is choose to believe and have faith in Him, be thankful for what we have, be thankful for what we do, and not sin. Remember, we turn away from every high thing, every sin that exalts itself above the knowledge of God, bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. So we too can be like Samson. Whatever, and we have warfare. Don't ever think that we don't, because we do. Our warfare is not visible like it was in the Old Testament. Our warfare is rulers and authorities in the heavenly realms, in the dark places, and the work. What does it say? Our warfare is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers and the authorities in the heavenly realms and the powers of this dark world. So we war against that. We need to take up the jawbone and fight with our words and with our faith against the enemy of God, the enemy of God's people, and the enemy of all people. Thank you for watching and listening, and pray and think about these things. Meditate on yourself. What do you think about this story, about these events in the life of Samuel and the people of Israel and in the Philistines? They're all connected. Okay? Thanks.